In a dimly lit laboratory, a scientist named Ivan Pavlov embarked on an experiment that would forever change our understanding of learning. The scene was set with hungry dogs confined to their own space, awaiting Pavlov's cues. The dogs, driven by their natural instinct, salivated in anticipation of the food they knew would come. Pavlov observed this unconditioned response, the salivation, as he prepared to introduce a novel element into the equation, a simple bell. With the dogs on edge, Pavlov rang the bell, its crisp sound reverberating through the laboratory walls. Initially, the dogs showed little interest, unaware of the significance this bell would soon hold. It was just another sound in their environment, devoid of meaning. But Pavlov was determined to change that. He meticulously repeated the process, pairing the ringing of the bell with the presentation of food. The dogs, hungry and attentive, began to take notice. They started to make a connection, a link between the bell and the impending arrival of food. Days turned into weeks and the experiment unfolded with captivating drama. Pavlov, a meticulous observer, noticed a remarkable transformation. As the bell rang, the dogs' ears perked up and their eyes fixed on the source of the sound. Their mouths, once salivating only in response to food, now moistened at the mere sound of the bell. But the true test came when Pavlov pushed the boundaries further. He rang the bell, but this time no food followed. The dogs, conditioned through Pavlov's careful pairings, anticipated the food. Their mouths watered and their bodies responded as if the food were right before them. The conditioned response had taken hold and the power of association became undeniable. Pavlov's experiment, filled with suspense and intrigue, successfully demonstrated classical conditioning. A neutral stimulus, the bell, had become a conditioned stimulus capable of eliciting a conditioned response. Hi everyone, in this video we are going to discuss the extraordinary works of Ivan Pavlov and his groundbreaking experiments and theories that have shaped our understanding of learning and conditioning. I am Blasan Varghese, a junior research fellow at Mahatma Gandhi University, Kerala, and welcome to my channel Mindscape. Ivan Pavlov was a renowned Russian physiologist and psychologist, born on September 26, 1849. He is known as the founder of modern behavior therapy as well as classical conditioning. He carried out experiments on the digestive glands as well as investigated the gastric function of dogs and eventually won the Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine in 1904, becoming the first Russian Nobel laureate. He is best known for his work on classical conditioning, which he discovered accidentally while studying digestion in dogs. One of the most famous experiments conducted by Ivan Pavlov was his research on classical conditioning, often referred to as Pavlov's dog experiment. His original intent for his experiment was not to study classical conditioning or its psychological implications. As a physiologist, Pavlov was primarily interested in studying the process of digestion in dogs. He wanted to investigate the relationship between the salivary response and the digestive system. Pavlov initially observed that dogs naturally salivate in response to food. He wanted to measure the amount of saliva produced and the specific timing of its secretion in relation to the presentation of food. But he noticed that the dogs would start salivating even before they received their food. This observation intrigued him and led him to investigate further. He hypothesized that the dogs had associated the sound of the approaching lab assistant or the sight of the lab coat with the impending arrival of food. To test this hypothesis, Paulo set up an experiment where he paired the sound of a bell with the presentation of food. Initially, the bell had no inherent meaning to the dogs and did not elicit any salivation response. However, after repeated pairings of the bell with the food, the dogs began to associate the bell with the arrival of food and started salivating in response to the bell alone. The experiment demonstrated the process of classical conditioning where an initially neutral stimulus, the bell, becomes associated with an unconditioned stimulus, the food, leading to a conditioned response, salivation, to the previously neutral stimulus, the bell. The phenomenon is known as the conditioned reflex. A conditioned reflex is a learned response that occurs in response to a stimulus. Paulo's dog experiment had a profound impact on the field of psychology and laid the foundation for behaviorism. It highlighted the concept of associative learning and the influence of environmental cues on behavior. This experiment paved the way for further research into classical conditioning and influenced numerous subsequent studies in psychology. A classic real-life example of classical conditioning is the case of Little Albert. The Little Albert experiment was a famous study conducted by psychologist John B. Watson and his assistant Rosalie Rayner in 1920. The purpose of the experiment was to investigate how emotions, particularly fear, can be conditioned in a young child. In the experiment, a 9-month-old boy named Albert was selected as the participant. Initially, Albert showed no fear of a white laboratory rat or other similar stimuli. However, Watson and Rayner aimed to condition him to fear these objects. They presented Albert with a white rat and simultaneously produced a loud, jarring noise by striking a metal bar with a hammer. This pairing of the rat with the loud noise was repeated multiple times. As a result, Albert began to associate the rat with a loud noise, which naturally elicited fear. Over time, the mere sight of the rat alone became sufficient to evoke fear in Albert. Additionally, the fear response generalized to other similar objects such as a rabbit, a dog, and even a Santa Claus mask. The experiment demonstrated that fear could be conditioned through classical conditioning, extending beyond the original stimulus to other similar stimuli. Critics have raised ethical concerns about the experiment primarily regarding the emotional distress caused to the child. Additionally, the long-term effect on Albert remained unknown as the study was never fully completed. The Little Albert experiment has had a lasting impact on the field of psychology, particularly in understanding classical conditioning and the role of environmental factors in shaping behavior and emotional responses. In conclusion, Paulo's experiment on classical conditioning, often referred to as Paulo's dog experiment, demonstrated the process of associative learning. Through repeated pairings of a neutral stimulus with an unconditioned stimulus, Paulo was able to condition the dogs to salivate in response to the bell alone, creating a conditioned reflex. This groundbreaking research laid the foundation for our understanding of how environmental cues can become associated with physiological responses, shaping subsequent studies in psychology and behaviorism. Paulo's experiment remains a seminal contribution to the field, highlighting the power of conditioning and its impact on learning and behavior. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the viewers of this video. Thank you for taking the time to watch, engage, and support this content. Your viewership and feedback are instrumental in creating a thriving community of knowledge sharing and learning. I appreciate your continued support and I look forward to bringing you more valuable content in the future. Thank you once again for being a part of this journey. Bye. Take care.